Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends spin a wheel every day leading up to Halloween, which is today. It chooses the horror movie and they discuss it. Today we're talking about 1998's Apt Pupil, which was directed by Bryan Singer. I'm your co-host Alec.
I'm Eric, and with us again, Dom Berger, our Stephen King expert. Dom, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. This is, for me, on Halloween of all days, this is number 13 for podcast.
Whoa, is it really spooky number 13?
Spooky 13.
13 days out Halloween. Look at us, Alec.
Holy shit, Dom. So this is your 13th appearance on the show. It is the 13th day of the Wheel of Horror Halloween, and it's Halloween.
Fuck yeah. Like, we planned it, right, guys?
The last spin, too. I love it.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Well, it's interesting, Dom, because you specifically chose this movie. We were like, Dom, you pick any, well, we said Stephen King, so we didn't say any movie, but any Stephen King movie you want, and you chose this one. So I am curious, why this one? You've read every single book, so why this?
Dude, so it's so interesting because, like, this is the first time I feel like you were like, hey, you know what? Pick any Stephen King. Right. And I'm trying to, you guys have done so many movies. A lot of them, you know, I've done with you with Stephen King. And I'm like, what would be a really good one that maybe they haven't seen? So I was like, oh, there's a short novella. And I was trying to explain this to last weekend to Eric when I was, drinking at a wedding. But
yeah, we were on the bus ride back. And I was what the fuck's this movie called? Apt Pupil? What? And you're like, it's like Shawshank Redemption and this. It's like, so I got to watch how many movies? Like... It was funny.
So the whole thing is, it's this book called The Four Seasons, right? And each season is a different story. And there's four different stories in it. And this is, so the first story within this, you know, they're all shorter stories called novellas. And the first story is Shawshank. And it's pretty close to what the movie is. So people that love the movie would love the novella. And the next one is called they're different seasons. So that's fall. And this one is called The Apt Pupil. And it's the Summer of Corruption. Right. And I remember I never heard about it before listening to the audiobook. And you know, it's a good audiobook and a good story when like you forget what you're doing and time just kind of like flies forward. And I just remember thinking, this is truly incredible. And then when I found out that there was a movie starring Gandalf himself, I was like, oh, this is going to be something a seasoned actor would really do well to be a part of. So have you guys seen this before, this movie?
Dude, never even heard of this movie. I didn't even know Stephen King had anything to do with it or that it even existed.
I've seen this movie 40 times. No, I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. And same as Alec, never even knew about it. Yeah.
And, like, I feel like I know about, like, Stephen King books, even if I hadn't seen a movie or read about it. It's, like, thinner. Like, I know what it is, you know, but, like, this one, never even heard of it.
It's so interesting, too, because when he lists, like, some of his favorites, you know, he lists The Body, which is another story. So those are three, like, big motion pictures that are all part of the same collection of short stories.
Is The Body based off of Stand By Me, right?
Stand By Me, that movie, dude.
Yep.
So, like, you know, Stephen King is at, like, a new level with this. I think he wrote The Apt Pupil right after he wrote The Shining.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this actually takes place, I guess, kind of close to when he wrote it then.
Yeah, and there's a couple of crossovers from the story, I think. So, like, 217 is the room in The Shining, and then 217 in the book is the guidance counselor's, like, room number, his office number.
Oh, okay. So... is this your first time seeing the movie too, Dom?
Yeah, this is my first time seeing the movie, and should we explain what the story is about, or?
Yeah, why don't you go for it, Dom? Yeah.
All right, so it's a story about a Nazi war criminal who's living, you know, in this town, and, you know, he's in incognito, right? He's escaped, and, you know, he's kind of living under the radar. He's an old man at this point, and there's this kid, Todd Bowden, and he is like 14 years old or 15 in the book, but he's like at his high school and they're covering the Holocaust. And, you know, he takes a real big interest in like war crimes, and the teacher encourages them to like look into it further if they're interested. So he goes to the library and he's like flipping through all these books, and he sees this photo of a general from a concentration camp, Auschwitz, right? And he realizes that it's a guy, you know, an old man from his town. And then he confronts this guy, and the whole story is about the power dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, and is that pretty similar book or the novella and the film? They're pretty similar in that regard.
Yes, there's some really good, juicy differences, which I'm so excited to talk to you about. But like, what do you guys think of Todd in the movie, like as a character?
Eric, why don't you go? I have some thoughts on this, so I want to hear what you guys have to say first.
How do I describe? I thought he was like, he starts off as a good character. He's a straight A student, and then he seems too bold for himself. Like I was like, this kid's so bold doing this. It's like out of left field. Like, why is he like blackmailing this war criminal? And why doesn't he just turn him in? He must be deranged.
That's kind of what I felt too, Eric. I was like, maybe, I'm sure the book gets into it more, but the film, I was like, what is the justification for this? Like, he's interested, sure, but like, he goes pretty dark pretty quick.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just like really quick. It's like, dude, this is bold.
Yeah, and it's like, it seems like he's got a very loving family. He's 16 and he's a senior, so he's very smart. So you're like, this kid's got it all. Like, he's got a friend that cares about him. He's on sports teams. He's got a girl that wants to suck his dick in a car. Like, everything's going good for him. So I don't understand why, I don't really get why he's crazy.
Dude, I mean, he's absolutely crazy. But a thing that the book does really well to kind of explain is, so Todd shows up on like Dusanders' front porch, right? And he confronts him. He's super direct, like you said. But in the book, like, it's almost like a Scooby-Doo episode where he comes in and he's super excited to tell Dusander how he caught him, right? So Dusander's like, you're mistaken, boy. And he's like, no. He's like, like, I got your fingerprints. And it's all like hypothetical. And this kid, it feels like World War II to him is like a fantasy, right? He wants to hear these stories. And the more he starts to hear these stories, the realer it actually affects this, perfect kid, right? Who everyone's told, like, you're going places, Todd. In the beginning of the book, he really idolizes his parents. He thinks that all their advice is key. And like, he's fearless because he's like, well, you're a Nazi, so I'm allowed to do whatever, and it's completely justified. But what he wants to hear is more about, and I'm wondering, like, so have you guys noticed on Netflix, like, the fucking craze with all of these murder mysteries, right? All these documentaries about unsolved or solved murders.
Oh, yeah, sure. There's a whole channel about it. I mean, ID, that investigative discovery. It's all it is, 24 hours a day.
Dude, and it's like, people people eat that shit up. They can't put out enough, Jeffrey Dahmer / whatever, tapes, all these kinds of different documentaries that go into the life of serial killer. We have this weird, sick, as Americans, fascination with like murder and like war crimes and terrible things. So that's obviously interesting to Todd in the beginning, but what if it actually affected you in a way that started to corrupt you, right? The more you learn about these like war crimes, the more it starts to twist you. You have these bad dreams, like you can't sleep at night. And I think the thing that shocked Todd the most is like, it starts to really resonate with him. He's always a kid who's like forced things. They come easy. He can be like, get easy, good grades, and he can smile and make the basketball team. But on the inside, he's a fucking sociopath, right? Doesn't feel anything. And then he starts to see all these heinous things and these stories, and it starts to really resonate with him. And at first, Dusander, you feel bad for him. It's this old man who's like, seems like he's trying really hard to stay under the radar. And this kid is blackmailing him into reliving all of these, World War II POW camp stories. And all of a sudden, like, and at first you're like, oh, this kid he's really like putting this guy through the ringer. And I don't know, what do you guys think of the scene where he starts doing the marching?
I mean, it was odd. It was, again, I was like, why is he doing this? What is he getting out of making him do this now? Is it just because he can? I mean, I just didn't really understand his motivation. Mm-hmm. I think that's the problem with the film for me, was with his character. Like, I thought Ian McKellan was fantastic. I'm like, dude, this is like your Hannibal Lecter kind of. But
yeah.
The kid just, for some reason, there was a disconnect with me and him. The actor, at least.
Yeah.
It's a reverse, like, not Holocaust, but like, it was like, instead of Ian McKellen, I won't say Ian McKellen, Dusander, gassing people and controlling them, he was now controlling the Nazi. And it was kind of like that. That's what I saw from it. It's like, I'm controlling you now. You're not in charge anymore.
Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting, dude? So have you guys ever seen Dexter, the television show?
Yeah, I've seen all of it.
I've seen the first season.
So that premise where Dexter has like this smile on the outside and his internal monologue is always about like how fucking he's going to kill somebody, or he like, he thinks so little of people, and he does it all with a big smile.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Todd's like on the inside.
Okay.
And then in the beginning, like, Dusander's like, hey, I'm doing this to stay alive, right? And then he starts to spot in Todd, like, the same thing that he has, right? He's like, oh, I know that, like, you're enjoying these stories more and more. And it starts to bring out this, these behavior traits that have been, long put to sleep. And, like, everything in the movie, from, like, the cat in the oven to... some other things, but Todd in the movie, he actually escalates, like, it's a longer period of time. It's like, he's from 14 to, I think, the end of senior year. So he was like 17 or 18. And as Todd starts to, like, hear these stories, he starts getting angry. He kills the bird, in the book as well. And then Todd in the book, he's really grossed out by, like, homeless people in the same way that in the movie, Doosander is. And Todd starts murdering homeless people in, like, the train yard, right? And so like, at the same time, they're both starting to, like, pick up very similar behaviors. But it's really weird because in the story, they can't trust each other. Each one of them says that they have a file somewhere that if something were to happen to them, it would, get exposed, and both characters would be in trouble. And both of them are lying.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing at the end. I thought, like, they would find a key and it would be like, oh, he was lying about lying. That's kind of what that was going to happen. But you know what? Just really quick. I mean, this is probably the first Stephen King film where I've seen where I'm like, I really would rather have read the book. I just felt like the director and the lead actor, there was just a disconnect with everything for me. I was, like, enjoying what I was watching. I wasn't bored at all or anything like that. I was always intrigued, but it just, for some reason, I just felt like there was a disconnect the whole time. Nothing really made sense to me, the justifications, even when Ian McKellan killed the homeless guy. I was like, why is this even happening? Why isn't he, like, taking his time to really, all right, I'm going to, like, stay under the radar. I don't want to fuck with this guy. I know he knows who I am, but I don't know.
Felt unrealistic. I think that's what you're saying too. It's like, why is this happening? Like, this doesn't add up. Like, where's the real reason?
Yeah, you explaining it, Dom, fills in the blanks for me and makes me, like, appreciate the story more. But I just think, I don't know. I think the director just kind of dropped the ball a little bit.
I agree. I mean, it was a 2-hour movie, right? Yeah. I'm thinking, like, maybe the pacing. And really, in the story, the reason that they start doing these, like, crazed acts is because it starts to break them down. Like, these characters, like, Todd starts really flunking courses, and he starts talking back to people. He's always angry because, when his grades drop, all of a sudden he can't hold this disguise on anymore, and his parents will suddenly realize that, like, something's been going on. But he needs those stories because it's the only place that he's actually excited. And, like, drives him to so much anger, and he can't kill Doosander because he's so paranoid that even when Doosander, in the book, Doosander's like, there is no letter. And he's like, I can't even trust that you're telling me the truth right now. Like, that's how much of a piece of shit I think you are, is I can't even trust that you're, like, when you tell me that I'm off the hook, that you're not lying to me.
Let's say that he never met Dusseldorf or whatever. Like, let's say that this never happened. Or whatever his name is. What do you think would happen to Todd? Do you think he would have became a serial killer? Or, like, did he need this event to, like, spark this in him? And it just happened that this guy lives in his neighborhood.
And that's the whole premise, right? It's like, this could happen in middle America with, like, the most promising young boy who's empty, right? If they have, like, a need for control like Todd does, like, you can tell his relationship with girls was never going to work out. In the movie they say, like, he's not into girls, which in the book it's even worse. It's like his sexual awakening is all about the Jews being tortured by the Germans, right? He has these, like, sex dreams about, like, strapping a young girl down, and, like, all these terrible stories that he's being told by Ian McKellan. Like, they start to really mess with his psyche. So he meets this girl who's, like, the girl that he's supposed to date in the town. They're, like, the logical choice. And he can't have sex with her unless he's imagining, like, a fantasy that's really fucked up.
Well, that's what we needed in this movie, and we didn't get it. This is like, you're at a poker table, and you have 10 chips, and you're like, I'm going to just put 7 in. This movie did not go all in, it feels like. It feels like it was reserved in the way you're describing it, Don. Because if they went there, that'd be way more. Way more. But it would make more sense.
But yeah. Wait till you hear the ending, because it is very, very different.
All right. Let me just say one thing, and maybe I'm hoping this is different in the book, because I watched this with Mike Valenti. Obviously, you guys know him, but people on the podcast. And we were both kind of sitting there. I was like, hold on. because he goes to the hospital at the end. He has the heart attack or whatever. He goes into the hospital. The Jewish guy sees him, tells on him, and says, like, that's a Nazi or whatever. Can you just fingerprint a person when they're unconscious? They're like, that does, I guess we'll believe this guy. Like, we'll just go do that. Like, is that a thing? Is that what happened in the book?
I mean, it's very similar in the way that, like,